Joining us now is Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who is a co-sponsor of the Big Oil Bailout Prevention Act. Senator Menendez, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Rachel, and thanks for being in Louisiana.
Your legislation would raise the liability cap from $75 million way up to $10 billion. If it passed, would it take effect immediately? Would it be retroactive to include this disaster here behind me?
Yes, we have a precedent for that. Superfund ultimately is the cleanup of toxic waste sites that were, made toxic by polluters in the past. So this is basically the provision that a polluter should pay. And in this case, that's BP and Transocean.
In exchange for that cap that exists now on liability, that $75 million cap, the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 also imposed a tax on oil companies, 8 cents for every barrel they produce in this country or that they import. If you were going to raise that cap from $75 million to $10 billion, would we expect that would mean a big new tax on oil, a change in the cost of oil?
Well, actually, BP just posted $5.5 billion in profits for the last quarter, not revenues, profits. So if they can do $5.5 billion in 3 months of profits, it seems to me that they and other companies and a whole host of other companies were somewhere in that range of $5.5 billion. Exxon had over $6 billion. Some had $2.5 billion. The bottom line is to create liability to the amount we're talking about of $10 billion is not going to ultimately hurt them that badly if they have a spill. And secondly, oil is really controlled on the marketplace with OPEC. So at the end of the day, it's not going to see a spike necessarily in oil prices simply because we hold the polluter to be responsible for their actions. And I heard the BP executive there, and I don't, you can try to shift blame and try to be responsible. At the end of the day, a $75 million liability. Yes, we keep hearing the president say BP is responsible for all the cleanup and all the effort, but at the end of the day, whenever this disaster finishes, and you have those ecosystems, and you have those fishermen, and you have those coastal communities, and you have the estuaries ultimately affected, who are they going to turn to? And the spill fund, which only has about $1.5 billion right now, simply isn't enough and has a limit of a $1 billion limit per incident. I'm afraid at the rate that we're going with this spill, which I think is going to exceed, unfortunately, the Exxon Valdez, that's just simply not going to help the people of Louisiana and throughout the Gulf region.
Senator Menendez, spending the day down here today talking to fishermen, thinking about the Exxon Valdez, not only how it set precedent here in terms of the laws that were passed after that, how it established that the spiller would be responsible for the cleanup, but also thinking about what happened to the fishermen who paid the most direct cost of the most direct human cost of that spill. The Exxon Valdez case spent decades in court. There was finally a Supreme Court decision, in 2008. So many of the people who ultimately got a reduced settlement from Exxon because of the Valdez spill, so many fishermen who had put in initial claims had died by the time that settlement finally arrived, that it was clear to everybody who watched that something went wrong. Would your legislation also address the timeliness with which people get compensated for losing their livelihoods?
Well, Rachel, we believe that, number one, what happened with the Supreme Court and the Exxon Valdez is that they reduced the punitive damages. My legislation talks about the liability, and therefore the liability comes up front right away, makes a determination. You're liable for up to $10 billion. And in doing so, we create the opportunity for fishermen, coastal communities, businesses, and all those who were legitimately harmed by the spill to have access to compensation within not just their lifetime, but a lot more immediately.
Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, thank you very much for your time tonight, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.